Hello guys, welcome to the chapter on sustainability and the common good. This is a topic that feels more pressing every year and that can give rise to heated political debates. Here we will see how economists try to model the environmental challenges in simple yet precise ways to motivate their policy recommendation. So just as a link with the previous chapters, the main version of the Solo-Swan growth model makes two implicit assumptions. Number one, that the stock of natural resources is stable, so we can just ignore it. And that technology always has a positive impact on production and wealth. We'll see that the two can not necessarily be true. The problem with natural resources is that they are not infinite. Here we can consider two different cases that are dealt with in different ways. So the case for non-renewable resources or quasi-non-renewable resources, consider, say, mining or oil, that resources that take a very long time to be created. So this is mostly a problem of optimal dynamic extraction that we call optimal control. So what is the best rhythm at which we should extract these resources? It's not the one that we're going to deal with here. And the second one is renewable resources. So an example that we are going to see is fisheries. And the solution is a solution of resource management and to solve coordination problems. The modern environmental movement, although it appeared really basically at the start of the Industrial Revolution, really came to be in the 20th century and especially after the Second World War. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, so people really became aware of the habitat loss and species disappearing. So the UN had this commission which was provided by Bro Arlen Brundtland and culminated in the Brundtland Report in 1987 and coined the term sustainable development, which is defined as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So here it's really a challenge to try to address two different goals. One is that there are still lots of nations, back then, that were undeveloped and that wanted to acquire the same standards of living as rich nations. But on the other hand, the awareness that the environment is finite and that if everybody consumes and pollutes as much as rich countries, then the world would have a hard time coping with it. So then these two underlying principles were developed. So the one is the concept of need, in particular the need of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given, and the idea of limitation imposed by technology and social organization and the environment's ability to meet the present and future needs. So this is not exactly a roadmap of how to do things, but a statement of goals, which have different implications. So in terms of renewable resources, again, what we should be aiming for is proper management of stocks. And in terms of non-renewable resources, well, this is not so clear. So you could think that some resource like some minerals could be extracted by one generation, and as much if there's enough recycling. So, for instance, one good example is Apple's trade-in program that asks a user to bring back their used technology so they can reuse the material inside it. So that's good. So it doesn't make any difference if you extract it and recycle it or if you wait a bit to extract it. But then for resources that are lost, like oil, for instance, then the question is, should one generation extract it and the other doesn't have it? Or should you wait so your kids have it? Or should nobody use it? So at some point, it's a question. It's more of a moral question than anything else. So of course, now we're going to focus mainly on the implications for renewable resources. So just before moving on, let's introduce some terminology that comes from public economics. So first of all, public goods. These are mainly classified according to two criteria. One is rivality, and the other is excludability. So rivality is simply we say a good is rival if the consumption by one person reduces the ability of other people to consume it. And excludable is, can I prevent other people from consuming it? And these two interact in such a way to create different markets and different problems. So if we start from the top left here, so a good that is both rival and excludable is just some private good, because if I consume it, then you can't consume it, and it's my property. I can prevent anybody from consuming it. There's no problem with that. So the two theorem of welfare economics state that if we only add excludable and rival goods, then there would be no real efficiency problem, and no need for governments to intervene in the markets. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. One other is a type of good is non-rival and excludable. So these are goods that can be shared, but it's easy to prevent other people from enjoying them if they didn't pay for it. And this category too is not so problematic. It just gives rise to things such as club goods, which are things that so if you want to consume it, you just have to pay your membership, and there's no real market problem with that. The real market problem comes from non-excludable goods, so goods that can be shared and used by everybody, but and it's very difficult to prevent people from essentially using the good without paying for it. So for rival goods, this case is called common goods. Open fisheries, wild berries, so anything that's open access, and this is what we're going to focus on here. And non-excludable and non-rival goods. So the problem with common goods is that once one person uses it, then there's less. So for instance, if I catch some fishes, they are not there for other people to be catched. But to be caught. But for non-rival goods, then this is what we call pure public goods. So the common examples are so knowledge, art, national defense, a lighthouse. So if a lighthouse produces light for some boats, then every other boats can use them, even if they didn't pay for the lighthouse. Or radio waves. All right, so in this chapter, we're going to focus on common goods, and especially the way we can model their dynamic production. Now, two other very important concepts in public economics. The first one is externality. So economists haven't started thinking about these ideas for just 10 years. It's more than 100 years they have thought about the problem of what if my actions or my consumption have some consequences on others. So the concept of externality was really imagined by Sidgwick before the 20th century and formalized by Pigou. And we define it as an activity by which an agent impacts a third party, which is not taken into account by the party and not mediated by price. So by this we mean, so the classical example would be, for instance, if I make, so if I make honey, so my bees are bringing me profit, but they are also helping the field of my neighbor to be pollinated, so that helps my neighbor. And if I don't take into account the benefit that this gives to my neighbor, so and my neighbor cannot communicate with me and ask me to essentially have more bees to help him, then this is an externality that's not that we see is not internalized by the decision of the first agent here. And of course, a negative externality would be, say, pollution, or in which, say, a firm just puts their waste in the water, and that affects negatively others. And we see is not mediated by prices. In what sense? In the sense that you could imagine, for instance, if I have a product and then some competitor has a better product and enters the market, so and takes my market share. So this is bad for me, but it's not what we would call an externality because it comes mediated by the market prices. Here, all the contracts that can be made are made, and there is not the presence of some inefficiency that we can really model. So that I don't want to go deeper right now into this, but this is the concept of externality. So finally, what is how does externality materialize themselves in common goods? Well, this concept has been popularized by Garrett Harding in a journal article in Nature in 1968, which is called The Tragedy of the Commons. And he really describes the problem of the common good that are rival and non-excludable. So, for instance, if you have a common pasture and every herdsman can bring their cattle to the common pasture, then if my cattle can eat all the grass, then there's less grass for others. And this lack of consideration for others is an externality. So when you have an open access public good, then this creates an externality. And this is what we're going to study more precisely here. So externalities can be managed, or common goods can be managed, but this has to be at a small scale. So one such one author that really studied this was Elena Ostrom, who was the first woman to get the Nobel Prize in Economics for her work. And she showed how rural communities in Africa and Nepal were able, if they had some common resource, to just basically monitor the community, and everybody in the community could understand that they should manage the good properly. And if they knew each other well, so they could develop common norms, common social norms to administer well these resources. Obviously, the problem is that not all common good open access goods are at small scales. And a very important case is the problem of fisheries, because it's a very large scale problem. Fisheries are all over the world, and all countries want basically to access fishes, and they don't care all that much about their neighbor. So there is the global version of this common managing, which is the treaties managing the sea resources, but as we see, it's as we know, it's so difficult to make it respected because so many boats just don't respect, and if countries don't have the will or the means to make this law respected, then open access fisheries are in a very hard time, a big amount of them. So one 2014 very interesting study showed that there were 200 ocean ecosystems that were modeled, and over 3,000 fish species. And they looked at their stock from 1880 to 2007. And what they found was really staggering. They found that there was a 2/3 drop in fish stocks of large fishes. So tuna, groupers, skate, sharks, swordfish. So really big fishes are in their stock is nothing like it used to be 100 years ago. And this is of course due to commercial fishing. And as a side effect, since these large fishes that are carnivore don't eat smaller fishes or other sea creatures, then there's a doubling in the stock of sardines, anchovies, and sometimes jellyfish blooms. So it means that if we eat all the large fishes, then they don't eat these smaller fishes. So maybe we should start eating more sardines and more even jellyfish. That's not maybe for the taste of everyone, but that's the state of the sea right now. So one example, of course, is the Atlantic cod. So as you can see, the fish catches were in a slow progress until maybe in the 1950 and 1960. And then I let you think a bit what happened in 1960, if you know your fishing history. Or if you have some relative that's a fisherman, they can tell you. So what happened was the invention of the trawler. So the trawler is a small boat at the surface of the ocean that carries a huge net that has a big ring and that catches all the fishes that enters in the ring, and that goes until the bottom of the ocean. So it means that fishes have a almost impossible time escaping this net, and it's very easy to catch fishes. And then it's super efficient. So then you see that the catches just skyrocketed until this mid-60s, where they were so many catches. And then, so what happened? Well, the catches were, if you harvest way faster than the sea is able to produce, especially large species of fish that take time to reproduce, then the stock crashed. And crashed so bad that in 1992 there was a moratorium. They just said, okay, we have to stop cod catching, otherwise the species is going to go extinct. But by the way, it's to show you how hard it is to really manage that. So what happened? They said, okay, so just in the prior years or in these years, now they said that there are quotas on all or a very large amount of the fish species that they can catch. So imagine what happens for a fishing boat is you just take your net out of the ocean and it's full of fish. And now you open it and you look, oh, well, okay, I have cods here, I have this other species there, and this other fish there. Well, cods, we are already at quota, so we can't catch more. So, well, we can't take it home, so let's just put it back in the sea. But the fish are so in bad shape that they just die. So it's just even more wasteful. And in the end, what they do is they use their trawler until they have caught their quotas of every fish species. But then all the fish, the extra fish that they catch and they just throw back in the sea, this fish just dies. So it's a very, very difficult situation, very difficult to manage by legislation, but manage properly. Another example is the Bluefin tuna that's so popular, especially for sushi. So again, so what happened there? Well, in the 1950s, lots of new technology appeared: the GPS, fish finders, satellite imagery. So there was no quota at the time, and you see that. So the catches skyrocketed, and then we catch almost all the fish that are available. So now we're here, and Japan's they catch very, very little. Australia they catch more. So we try again to manage these stock of fishes, but it's very difficult, and it's for big fishes like tuna. It's not very easy to farm them, to have fish hatcheries. It takes a very long time for a tuna to grow big. And it's super valuable to catch them. So there was one story in 2019 where one big tuna was sold at the auction for $3 million. So if it's worth $3 million, if you catch one fish, then you can bet that people are going to put a lot of effort into catching it. All right, so let's go on with